The beginning of 20th century, a tipping point in human history. Electricity is spreading across the world along with the first telephones. The whole planet is already explored and researched, except some dark spots in Africa, some mountains of Tibet, and the tiny islands of Oceania. So what else can you do at that wonderful time? Start a world war? Climb Everest? Begin atomic researches? Or maybe become a landowner in India? Nah, none of that. This is too obvious and boring. Almost a century ago, in 1820, Russians discovered that, well, Antarctica is an empty place with no useful resources and it's fully covered in ice. And there is no polar bears. It is so funny to see all the pictures of polar bears and penguins together when you understand that they have never seen each other. Because you can find penguins only in Southern Hemisphere, in Antarctica, South America, Australia and South Africa with Namibia. Meanwhile, polar bears live only in Northern Hemisphere, to be exact, in the Arctic Circle. But before we continue, please put like on that video and subscribe to my channel. Thank you. There is one scene that united Arctic and Antarctic. People weren't interested in them before 20th century. Arctic Circle as well as Antarctica were already explored, so what else can people find and explore here? Oh, yeah, Northern and Southern Poles. If African explorers suffered from malaria mosquitoes, hippopotamuses, crocodiles and other inhabitants of Africa, well, explorers of Arctic suffered only because of two sins. Polar bears, because they are friends of Russians and they defend this land from foreigners. And the second problem is cold, but that didn't stop some people. Plus, don't forget about problems with food. But you can always fight one by one with polar bear and eat him. For example, expedition of 1897 to the Arctic Pole on balloon. Andrew Salomon decided that it would be a great idea to reach North Pole not by land, but just fly to it on balloon. Come on, everything is much easier than you think. But unfortunately it didn't work. On the third day of expedition, they had to land on the ice and continue their trip on sledge. One of the main problems for them was food, which was actually solved pretty easily. He and his team killed and ate around 30 polar bears. So don't say that you can't find food in Arctic Circle. But let's get back to the opening of poles. So two Americans, Robert Peary and Frederick Cook, had the same goal – to be the first human who reached North Pole. Cook stated that he reached it on 21st of April 1908. Then Peary stated that he reached North Pole on 6th of April 1909. Both of their expeditions were disputed for a long time, but that's not the main point. Doubts about the achievements of Cook and Peary prompted Norwegian explorer Roald Amundsen to his own expedition, but to the South Pole. Cause you know, there were no disputes about reaching it, because no one has ever reached it before, so his main goal was to become a first human who reached South Pole of Earth. Spoiler, he's gonna be the first human who has officially reached North Pole too. Both expeditions of Peary and Cook will be denied later. But Amundsen wasn't the only one smart guy. So this is Robert Scott, a British Royal Navy officer and explorer. Robert Scott was the guy who discovered Antarctic Plateau, on which locates the South Pole. British Empire has already controlled a good part of world. India, Canada, a great chunk of Africa, Australia, New Zealand and many more territories. They had enough territories, but not so many glories. So they needed to be the first one somewhere else except a mound of land. British Empire had much better positions than anyone else. Falkland Islands, Australia, New Zealand and many more islands and territories in Southern Hemisphere. Everything told that South Pole is gonna be reached by Britain. Take a look at this photo. It was taken on 17th of January 1912. You can see a Norwegian flag here. But none of these people are Norwegians. All of them are English people from Robert Scott's expedition. On this photo they understood that South Pole was already reached by Norwegians, so they lost the race. But that's not the worst sin. The worst sin is that all of those people will never come back home, and on the way back all of them are going to die. British expedition was planned from the beginning of 20th century and step by step, researching everything. They were preparing themselves for it. British tactic of reaching South Pole was based on scientists' researches, accuracy and long-time preparations. A Norwegian expedition was way simpler. They used only sledge and dogs, instead of British plan, which consisted of using motorized sleds, Mongolian ponies and dogs. Of course it sounds great, but it turned into a big disaster. Motorized sleds broke pretty fast, ponies died, and there were not enough dogs. Everything went wrong. Amundsen and Scott choose a little bit different passes and strategies, and even on map we see that Norwegian one was way better and shorter. On 14th of December 1911, Norwegian expedition with Roald Amundsen have finally reached South Pole, and that was officially confirmed. But British expedition didn't know about arrival of Norwegian one. 2 months later, when Robert Scott reached South Pole, he was heavily disappointed, but Robert didn't have any other choice except confirming his loss in this race. Road to home was a huge pain. Lack of food, low temperatures and tiredness killed the whole team one by one. On 30th of March 1912, Robert Scott and all who has left in his team died from exhaustion after reaching 3/4 of pass. Yeah, Amundsen reached the South Pole first, but despite of Robert Scott's failure, he was remembered much more than Amundsen. Today we can find a lot of statues of Robert Scott across the world. On his motherland, he was remembered as the great hero, and his exploit was remembered and mentioned many times. Strict facts and statistics aren't always more important than real and exciting history. When someone tells me word bravery, I always remember Robert Scott and his will to live.